Good morning, chapter 17. So they're back on the Sunfire. Okay. After their adventures on Leo 5, the Sunfire felt warm and welcoming. As they climbed back on board, Lucky was glad to feel his hooves locking onto the ship's surfaces once more. It was good to smell that strange scent of gunpowder, chocolate and spice again. It seemed reassuringly familiar now. Mystica and the captain were waiting for them in the hold. Mystica was wearing a turquoise robe and headscarf. All her golden rings were gleaming, as if she'd polished them up specially. She beamed when she saw Professor Bazantine and above him Bazooka the Phoenix, flapping into the ship with infectious glee. "Welcome, everyone. Welcome, my friend," she called. She clapped her hands with delight, filling the air with joyful jingles. "Mystica Grandax," said the professor, "you are a sight for sore eyes." "Bazooka," agreed the little phoenix, landing on her shoulder. Mystica smiled, and her eyes shone like the sun. "Oh, it's good to see you, old comrades. I miss you so much. I remember when you first came to him, Bazooka. You were just a little chick." She stroked the phoenix, and Bazooka's feathers glowed with warmth. "Tell me, how do I look?" "Magnificent," said Professor Bazantine, bowing gallantly. "You are as radiant as ever." It was true. Mystica seemed to light up in the professor's presence, and the professor, for his part, seemed much warmer and more affectionate than he had on Leo. Before Lucky's eyes, these two old star-talkers appeared to shed the years. He could easily imagine that they must have been like in the past, when they were young and strong. Professor Bazantine was flattering Mystica shamelessly. "Did you know she was a sensation in her day?" he was telling Frolix and Bixer. Songs were written about her eyes of gold and lustrous long hair. Mystica looked embarrassed, and even a little sad, but then a small smile spread across her face. "I was quite something back then, wasn't I?" she said. She led them through the cloistered corridors, hobbling slowly but purposefully towards the Sunfire's main cabin. As they went, Lucky told her everything they learned on Leo 5. "Well, at least now you know more about your father," she said, her stick clacking on the ground. She glanced at the professor. "What do you think, old friend? Can you help him with his astrolabe?" "Why, of course I can," said the old axer, and his words gave Lucky hope. But then the professor edged ahead to walk beside Mystica, and his voice dropped very low. "However, if his father is on the other side of the space wall, well, that's a dangerous place. And this is a dangerous time. Something has gone dreadfully wrong with the galaxy. The stars themselves are in peril. Do you not feel it?" Mystica's reply was also quiet. Lucky had to strain to overhear her words. "Of course, I feel it in my own body." The professor twisted his whiskers. "Many feel it in their minds. Everywhere there is the suspicion that nothing means anything anymore. The living death is spreading, and so are these strange stories. The wolf that eats the stars." "What is it, this wolf?" shuddered Mystica. "I would give anything to know," said the professor. I suspect its origin lies in the Aquarius system, but I've heard no word from Aquarius for a year now. I dread to think what the humans are doing there under cover of their blockade. There is but one source of hope, the return of the 12 Astræus. Mystica's face lit up. "Ah, so you've dreamt of them too?" "Indeed I have, every night." They had reached the silver archway at the entrance to the main cabin. Lucky's skin prickled as he glimpsed the walls inside. The vid screens were all gleaming like stained glass in a cathedral, showing images of those amazing people with their wings and halos, tridents and scythes, holding whole worlds in their hands. "But who exactly are the 12 Astræus?" he couldn't help asking. "Are they gods?" Mystica turned to him and smiled, eyes shining. "They've been called that and many other things through history. Gods, angels, devils, demons, all the supernatural beings you ever heard of. But we call them the 12 Astræus. They go right back to the beginning of everything, always. They were there at the creation of the universe, at the dawn of the earth, and then later, as we spread out across the stars and found our way to the galaxy, every culture had known them. Images like this have been found in the ruins of every ancient civilization. They have taken different forms of different times and places, but always the images point back to the same 12 beings, the same magnificent immortals, returning time and time again." Lucky gazed at the shimmering images and wondered if the stories could be true. "Have you seen one?" he asked. "Oh, if only," she said. "The Astræus have not been seen for countless years, generations. And what makes you think they'll come now when they haven't for so long, said Captain Knox. He moved. Sorry. You ever lost my way. And what makes you think they'll come now when they haven't moved for so long, said Captain Knox. He moved to stand by the two Star-Talkers, with our Lucky, Bixer and Frolics hung back behind them. They come at times of greatest need, said Mystica. When could the need be greater than now, when the galaxy is torn apart by suffering and war? But what if they've abandoned us, said the captain quietly. What if they were never real in the first place? Never real, said the Professor, visibly shocked. Where were they then when Joxy and Jonathan died, asked Captain. Where were they when we lost our homes and had to leave the worlds? They will come, insisted the Professor. I believe they're in Aquarius right now. They must surely be somewhere behind the wall. Why else would the humans be expending such vast resources, if not to hide great secrets? I say we take the bull by the horns. We should cross the wall and find the 12 Astraeus ourselves. Mystica nodded in agreement. The Professor is right, she murmured. We must cross the space wall and go into the war zone. Captain Knox stared at them and shook his head. No, he said simply. We are doing no such thing. Locke's insides tangled as he listened, for if the Sunfire crossed the space wall, then he'd be so much closer to finding his father, and yet the captain's fears troubled him too. But everything points to it, said the Professor Bazantine. Everything lies out there beyond the wall. The 12 Astraeus, the wolf that eats the stars, even this boy's father. The boy, said Knox darkly. I fail to see the relevance. The Professor's eyes glinted. I feel sure he has some part to play in this. Perhaps he has a new kind of Star-Talker, or perhaps he is a guide, someone the stars have sent to help lead us to the 12. He glanced at Lucky, who shivered at his words. In any event, we must go back. And everything that's happened, said the captain, after everything they did to us, if you think that, then you're a fool, Professor. Ozymandias, said Mystica sharply. He is our guest. And he is proposing a course of action that could destroy us all. There was a silence for a moment, deadlock. The captain and the Professor stared at each other, totally still. The air itself grew taut and tense between them. Lucky watched, heart in his mouth, waiting to see who would blink first. What happened to you, Captain, said the Professor Bazantine at last. You used to be the most fearless pilot in the galaxy. It was only your courage that saved Frolix and Bixer from the dark matter bombs all those years ago. Frolix and Bixer flinched at his words, but Knox just kept staring at the Professor, his eyes burning. The safety of my crew is my sole concern, he said. I will not allow this foolishness to endanger them. Ozymandias Knox, blazed Mystica, her eyes flaring like the sun, a voice so grand all of a sudden that even the captain's authority was eclipsed. We are Star-Talkers, and the stars themselves are in danger. This is no time for safety. Set a course for the space wall. Knox blinked. He seemed to shrink a little. But Mystica, the decision, she said, is made. She took a decisive step forward across the threshold into the main cabin. Around her, the vidpix of the 12 Astraeus shimmered and shone, haloing her with light. Then she turned and held her hand out to the captain. Of course, she said, more softly. You are still the master of this ship and the finest navigator in the galaxy. I would far rather it were you that took us across the wall than anyone. But please understand, my dear, we are going there, whether you come with us or not. The captain pulled away from her, eyes clenched shut. Sometimes he said, almost to himself, I wish you were a Star-Talker, You weren't a Star-Talker, Mr. Grandax. He shook his great head in sorrow. Oh, what's the point? He muttered as he walked away towards the cockpit. What does it matter what I think? It doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter anymore. And then he was gone. Everyone breathed out again. Mystica sighed deeply. Her eyes stopped blazing and her eyes started to shake. I'm sorry about that, she said. The captain is not himself, and has not been ever since those terrible times. He is not wrong to fear what lies beyond the wall, said Professor Bazantine, as they followed her through the archway into the cabin. Everything we hope for is out there, but so is everything we dread. And if your father is somewhere in the midst of that chaos, boy, then we need to know precisely where. So let us look at your astrolabe and see if we can find you an answer. I wonder what we found out in chapter 17. Why is Captain Knox so upset? Thank you.